Do not start an Airbnb business without watching this video. The opportunity is not what you think it is. And I don't mean the opportunity is bad, but it has changed so much that you need to know 5 things before starting your Airbnb business in 2025. And I'm going to tell you those 5 things today. I've been a host for over 10 years, and the students that I've coached to start their businesses, they have made over $1 billion. And everything has changed in the last 2 years. The first thing that you need to know is Airbnb is no longer the Wild West. This has pros and cons. 10 years ago, you could start an Airbnb and not know anything about anything and find your way through the maze. But today, you'll need a plan. And here's your plan. Before you just go buy any furniture, you first will need to do market research to look at what people actually like to stay in. This means that you will spend real money on interior design. You cannot avoid that. But Airbnb on the very first page of search will tell you exactly how you should design your property. And this changes per market. There's no one design style that's just going to crush in every single market because the travelers are different. You have things that you love, I have things that I love, and we'll choose to stay in separate places. This is such a big deal that you're going to be seeing videos of me completely renovating properties that I've held on for over 5 years. For example, there's an ugly studio in downtown Dallas that we've turned into the Red Room, a complete recreation, and I'm doing a whole video on that so you can find out how much that cost. But teaser alert, it wasn't an expensive flip. So what I'm saying is you don't need to spend a ton of money to get into Airbnb by any means. But you need to make sure that your dollars have a point and a purpose by finding the right customer using Airbnb's algorithm. And I teach that on this YouTube channel, don't worry. The reason why this may be more good for you than bad is Airbnb grew like a hockey stick for a while, adding more and more and more inventory. They had all the room because they had new customers. And at the point that customer growth stops moving upward, people who do a bad job of this will start to fall out of the bottom. Airbnb's algorithm is self-cleansing. They push the good listings to the top, and the bottom ones go hungry and end up quitting eventually. And we're at a phase of this industry that's post-Airbnb bust. There was a huge boom post-COVID 2022, and then there was a crash, you could say, because there's just too many listings and not enough good hosts. And this has led to an interesting timing where there's negative sentiment from hosts that have failed and they're crying about it online. When people cry about an opportunity online, there will be less hosts, meaning that as these channels, Airbnb and Vrbo and Booking.com, which you'll get on all of them eventually, as they get new customers, there's not as many hosts coming in because somebody online was complaining about the opportunity. We are going into a phase of our cycle where hosts will have a stronger position. It's not the Wild West. You can't just throw anything into the market. You need to have a plan. And I'll have a playlist on design at the end of this video for you that you can watch to start there. The second thing that you need to know is buying a house right now is still super sketchy. Because interest rates are so high and there's a record number of sellers versus buyers because people aren't bringing their homes down, buyers don't want properties. My real estate friends are having a hard time finding any property that makes the cut for an investment property. But this leads to positives on the back end. You probably know that you don't need to buy a property to do short-term rentals. That's maybe how you found this channel. All 150 of my Airbnbs are arbitrage. I sign leases. And then I put furniture in those properties and rent them out on Airbnb and I keep the spread. That's called Airbnb arbitrage. That's one of 3 ways that you can run an Airbnb business. Another one's called co-hosting. We'll cover that later. And the third one is purchasing. I will say that you can find a property to purchase, and by putting it on Airbnb, you can be cash flow positive. To do that with a long-term rental right now is really, really hard. And that's probably why there are so little buyers. That and of course, the interest rates being so high. Now, this is not a forever problem. Interest rates go up and down. And just yesterday, there was news online that we might be pressing criminal charges against our Treasury, Fed chair, whoever sets the interest rate. If you're interested in doing arbitrage or co-hosting, it's a perfect time to do so. Because now imagine, there are so many more sellers than there are buyers. Those people have houses that they need to get rid of or need to repurpose at bare minimum. Houses that you own and don't have a tenant in or don't live in are a liability. They have a holding cost. You've got to pay debt on it and just chill and wait for something to get better. And you could be the thing that gets better. You can call a property that's been for sale for more than 60 days on any site like Zillow or wherever, talk to the real estate agent and say, hey, I want to rent this property from you. We can do an open-ended agreement until you sell the property, potentially, or the fact that I rent from you could make it an investment property that somebody else would buy. So I would like to talk to you and the owner about me renting this property, furnishing it, and then running it as a short-term rental. This is a historical moment, and it cannot be understated. There's never been a time in my life, in the last 10 years of my life since Airbnb has been relevant, that I have said that it is so simple to call an owner of a property and make a presentation and that they would say yes. Normally, I would say you need a much more fancy script, a sales system to talk someone into it. But right now, sellers are in such a difficult spot, and people know enough about Airbnb now that it's been around for 15 years that you don't need to do a dog and pony show to pick up your first Airbnb arbitrage. You can literally just tell the owner, there's a win-win here, and I will rent the property from you and pay your holding costs, and we'll see how this goes. Apartment complexes are still another story, and I do have a playlist on pitching buildings and landlords if you want to learn arbitrage. This is the OG place to learn that too. So thanks for being here, by the way. Bucky's coffee break. The third thing that you need to know is how much Airbnb has changed. This is important to know because relatively, I think they're not going to change nearly as much moving forward. Airbnb's been kind of like this lately, changing all of their rules. They recently put into play a policy that if somebody commits credit card fraud, Airbnb doesn't just eat the whole loss, that a host will eat the loss if a credit card payment gets reversed for fraud. Right? We don't know how big of an issue that is. We'll find out in September. But they've also changed their cancellation policies. They've pretty much removed Superhost and created something new called Guest Favorites. They've created this new off-platform policy, transparency policy, non-circumvention policy. And you know what? Hosts hate it. They absolutely hate it. Because when you run a business and someone third-party to your business starts messing with your money, you get pissed. Because imagine you're working a job and then your boss says, we're going to add 2 more roles to your position and we're cutting your pay by $5,000 a year. People quit. And that's the point. People are quitting because of Airbnb policy. To hang on to Airbnb while it went through this identity crisis because it's no longer privately owned and now it's publicly owned was really hard for a lot of hosts. And a lot of hosts didn't make it. My point to you is the worst is gone. And this is another one of those things that hosts will be talking negatively about is that Airbnb did all these negative things and I hate them. And then they get on Reddit and say, I hate Airbnb. You can see it everywhere. Again, this only matters for the perception of the opportunity. And if you're thinking of starting an Airbnb business and everybody else hates the idea of hosting, well then who's gonna host? And if no one's gonna host, the guests will pay more money because there's less hosts. Just classic supply and demand. So my ADHD nerd nugget of gold for you right here is that it's like a recession. They say that the world's money is made in recessions. And it's made in exactly this way. Opportunities are good, people start businesses. Recessions hit, cash flow dries up, and then people quit, okay? And then when people quit because it wasn't as good as it used to be, the people who start businesses at that low, they don't know any different. They're just happy to start their first business. And so what happens is the opportunity gets better from there, and it's just all up. And so you, if you're used to operating in a where Airbnb's already made all these changes and you couldn't care less because you've never seen a different policy, you've never had to survive other policies, you're gonna be just fine because it's all psychological. I have a friend whose property was making $14,000 a month net profit and it dropped down to like $5,000 net profit and they quit. Because they're like, this is so stupid. We used to make $14,000 net per month. It's like, what are you doing? A profitable property is a profitable property. What else are you gonna do with it? You're not gonna make $5,000 a month net profit operating as a long-term rental, are you? No, this is still your best play. Yikes. And that brings me to the fourth thing that you need to know. The truth of this industry that most hosts just hate to have to stomach is that the market moves in cycles. Just like real estate. Real estate has some 18-ish, 20-ish year cycle that's probably all messed up now. But Airbnb has a cycle like this, and it's a sentiment-driven cycle. When things get bad, people quit, and then there's less hosts, and then it gets good for hosts. And when it gets good for hosts, when you're making tons of money, people will want to do what you do and people will join the industry. And then there will be too many hosts sharing the same pie, less money for everybody, profits go down, and then the bottom falls out, and then it comes back up again. And it keeps dipping as there's oversupply in waves. And the oversupply in waves comes largely from social media. You're watching this video, prospecting an opportunity to start a business in a low barrier to entry world. And if it was a trash idea right now, then maybe you wouldn't start. And if it's a good idea right now, then maybe you will. And it is almost that simple. I would encourage you to just keep watching this channel as things change year over year, because what we've realized is every time that there's a dip, there tends to be an X factor that if hosts do one thing right or make one key change, they stay at the top of the industry. I've been doing this for over 10 years, and I have students who I've coached for over 7 years that are still in the game too. You see people on Instagram and YouTube saying, I'm starting my Airbnb business. They try to be an influencer and then they do a video how they're quitting like 2 years later. This isn't for everybody. And that's a 4.5. I want you to just really ask yourself, why are you doing this and what kind of person are you? This is hospitality. This is a business. It's not real estate. If you're cool with that, that's the only thing we need to talk about. You will be servicing a customer who's paid you for a service. You do use a piece of real estate and you set it up with interior design. And there are passive elements if you do this right and hire the right people and maybe use some software, but you still owe somebody value delivery, okay? Just dog ear that. You know, if I could just make YouTube videos and drink coffee all day, I probably would do that. That in the gym now, that's a thing. Oh, by the way, guys, if you're interested, I'm going to be speaking and like hosting, emceeing at an event called GuestyVal. It's run by Guesty, the channel manager that I use, in Mexico City, mid-September. That's gonna be super fun. So I'll be down there interviewing people. We'll be talking about Guesty's Price Optimizer software. I'm gonna maybe be on stage. Guesty might actually put me on stage, which would be super cool. But either way, I'll be kind of like an MC spokesmodel person. Don't dare call me a model, spokesperson. And there'll be a link in the description for that. Number 5. This is probably the biggest consideration because you only get to make this decision once per property. Even your design style can change. This Airbnb's been up for a while. We just changed the wall color to make those pop more. I think it was a good idea. But you only get to pick up one property, one at a time, and when you pick up the property, it either succeeds or it fails and you give it back, right? And so property selection will be the most important part of running an Airbnb business. And I will tell you that some properties have the right bones. Write that down, bones, okay? I like to use the phrase architectural interest. I made that up, but we use it in my program. It really does define the basis of how we look at properties. I like high ceilings. I like exposed brick. I like wood trusses in the ceilings. I like fireplaces. I like oddly shaped spaces. I like cute windows, entranceways that are rounded or have wood frame, or really cool views out the window, like water or bridges or unique structures or whatever. There's a laundry list of things that when you look at a property, you're gonna ask yourself, can this property do most of the heavy lifting? Because we are photographing a space, saying, hey, come stay here. And that's the premise of Airbnb. It's all in the photos. There are some cool things that you can do to make your place interesting, like buying fancy geodes, but that gets expensive, right? If you could find a property that just looks cool in photos, that is like the number one, and then you can improve that with design. You take something that's already cool and make it cooler, you win. That is how simple this industry is right now. There are so many people that learned from me in 2019, 2021, that learned you could scale to 100 doors, that had just taken 20 or 30 doors at a time, and they're dumb doors. They're just like the white shoebox apartment complexes, and you don't want those, okay? If you want to put my old students out of business, never rent a shoebox unless there's a real good reason to. And I could give you a scorecard for that, pros and cons for each building, and you can talk to my team in private. There's gonna be a link down below if you want me to really teach you how I prospect properties and how we pitch buildings and everything else in Cracking Soup Roast. There's 7 coaches, and 5 of the people on my team make more than $1 million on Airbnb, including the guy that you would talk to about joining the program. He learned in the program. He had 0 properties, started working in sales for us, and now he has like 40-something Airbnbs. So this definitely does work. Thanks for giving me your time in this video. It means a lot. This is my favorite thing to do is teach, and it's great to have you here. The corner, I promised you a playlist for design. Watch that next, or I'll even give you one on market research. Those are probably the 2 biggest topics right now in the space. And as always, my friends, I'll see you on the other side.